Yes, I'm Phil Chiles, and I want to start by thanking you for having us here today. I think it's always good that when we can inform the citizens about what the issues are and where people stand on them. So I'm happy to be here today, and I have been a native of Springfield. I was born here, raised here, went to public schools here, graduated from Springfield High School, and then shortly after that went into the Marine Corps. I was in the Marine Corps from 1967 to 1971, spent a year in Vietnam. While I was in the Marine Corps, I got married to my current wife of 46 years, and we have 3 children now. 2 of those were born while I was still in the Marine Corps. My roots in Springfield go deep. My great-grandfather was Willis Spaulding and built Lake Springfield. He was the water commissioner here for 32 years and probably instilled in me 2 things. One was a desire to read. Every time I'd go to his house, he'd send me home with a book that was way beyond my comprehension level and said, read this and then we'll talk about it. And I would stumble through it and make it, and we would talk about it. And then the second thing is public service. He was a firm believer that a person ought to give back to their community, to their country, to their church, and so he instilled that in me. And then my mother was much the same way, and she too made that a very important thing in our lives. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I came back to Springfield. I went to school at Lincoln Land Community College and then Sangamon State University at that time, before it became UIS Springfield, and got a degree in political science. About that time, Governor Thompson was elected. And at the time, I was working as a legislative aide for Senator Doc Davidson. And Doc was a political mentor of mine. And at the time, Thompson came around and said, I'm looking for people with legislative experience who can go out into the agencies and be liaisons. So I went to DOT as an assistant liaison. And I was there for a little over a year, and then I was asked if I would go over to the Department of Administrative Services, which is now CMS, and start a legislative office because they didn't have one. So I went over there and formed a legislative office, also became their Director of Public Information. So from there, I went to conservation, and that was my choice from the first. I really wanted to be in conservation. It was near and dear to my heart. And so I went to conservation and ran that legislative office for a number of years until I was promoted to be the Director of Public Information for the Illinois Department of Conservation. In 1984, I took my wife and 3 children to Liberia, West Africa, where we served on the mission field for a year and a half, doing a lot of things, but primarily teaching and running a medical clinic. My wife's a nurse, and she was the highest trained medical person within about 85 miles. And so we ran a medical clinic in a Methodist mission school called Camphor United Methodist Mission. And we were there for a year and a half. Then I came back, went back to work for the Department of Conservation for a year, and then went to seminary at Asbury Theological Seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky. My family and I were down there for 3 years, and both of my daughters graduated from high school in Lexington, Kentucky. Both of them decided to stay. We came back to Springfield, and we came back to Murrayville because I was pastor then of the United Methodist Church in Murrayville, Illinois for 3 years. And at that point in time, they were looking for somebody to do a new church start here in Springfield. And I came back to Springfield in 1992 to start Crossroads United Methodist Church. I served there until 2000. In 2000, the Methodist Church, as they have a tendency to do, wanted to move me. And my wife didn't want to move because she was the primary caregiver for her mother, who died about 2 years after that. But she was her primary caregiver, so we decided to leave the church, and I began to sell real estate, and I've done that for the last 15 years. Over that time, I've been very involved in a lot of not-for-profit organizations. Primarily, though, the one that I've spent most of my time in is Habitat for Humanity. And I've been on the Habitat for Humanity board on and off for the last 20 years, have directed the building of several homes, including 3 across the state last year when I was president of the Illinois Association of Realtors, which is a 43,000 member organization. I was president of the local Association of Realtors about 8 years ago. But both of those things have taken a considerable amount of time. I'm done with both of them now, and so I'm turning to a new chapter in my life, and I'd like to represent the citizens of Springfield on the city council.
Okay, my name is Ralph Hanauer, and I grew up here in Springfield on the west side. We actually, I tell, as I'm going door to door, I tell the residents that I was actually on the farthest point west that you could be, and then they built a big berm behind my house, and then next thing you know, there's a Veterans Parkway behind it, and that was supposed to be the edge of Springfield. And now most of the area of Ward 10 that we support, that we represent, doesn't even cover the other side of Veterans Parkway, only a small portion of it. I grew up here, went to Christ the King grade school, and then went to Griffin High School. I graduated in 1979. I grew up as a swimmer here. I was one of the first state champions out of the city of Springfield, which I'm very proud of. Ended up graduating from Griffin High School and going to University of South Florida on a swimming scholarship. I swam 1 year there, and then retired and became an athletic trainer, as a student trainer. I finished at University of South Florida with a degree in health education with a specialty in athletic training. I worked for a professional soccer team at the time as an intern. And when we were done, the league actually folded, and so I came back here, and with the intent of getting my license in athletic training, and trying to get a job somewhere. And I got a temporary job with the state of Illinois at the time, and I was making twice the money working half the time. So the temporary job actually lasted so far for 29 and a half years. I'll hit 30 years in November 16th of this year. Currently, I'm married. I have 2 kids. I've got my wife Lisa. I've got my son Robbie, who's a freshman at University of Missouri, and my son Levi, who's a 3rd grader at Christ the King. My current job with the Central Management Services with the state of Illinois, I'm a network engineer where I support 40,000 connections and PCs statewide. Our responsibility is direct connection to the device. I'm used to taking a lot of phone calls from people. Usually they're not real thrilled because their computer's not working. And then the second reason is because it's another agency that has to call CMS, and as Joan knows, CMS isn't well liked among a lot of state agencies. So we deal with a lot of constituent calls. We work them out, get them fixed, and get them moving again. So I've been a youth coach since I was 15 years old, coaching swimming, basketball, baseball, football. I just retired after 30 years with the Sacred Heart Griffin football program as an athletic trainer with them, and athletic trainer aide, I should say. I was fortunate enough to get 5 state championship rings out of them. Dealt with a lot of great kids, a lot of great parents, and of course a lot of great coaches as well. So and I look forward to I've actually enjoyed going door to door. I had some people approach me about jumping in the race, and I thought about it, thought it'd be a good move, and I've really enjoyed going door to door. It's been something that I've gotten to meet a lot of people that knew my grandfather who grew up here. my father, who coached in Girard, Illinois, when I was very, very young, and hearing stories about that I would have never heard. And to me, that's something that's a positive about everything about this is the stories that I've gotten to hear. And it's actually kind of interesting to see the number of people that actually knew my grandfather, who, he died in 1989, I think. So from that part, it's great. So, and I appreciate you guys having me here.
Let's talk about the main priorities in Ward 10, what you see as issues that need to be addressed by the City Council. Start with.
Well, going door to door, the number one issue that I'm hearing going door to door is the condition of our streets out there. A lot of the neighborhoods, Cobblestone, Panther Creek, Mill Creek, the roads about every 150 yards has a dip with a crack in it, and I've had people tell me that it literally when the garbage trucks or the UPS trucks come by and hit that, it literally shakes their windows. That's been probably the most common denominator among the neighborhoods. The second thing is traffic, and people wanting to have Archer Elevator and aisles widened. I've had people ask about Cockrell Lane, about Linhart, and trying to get some of the roads to alleviate some of the traffic problems. And then, of course, with running in the winter and with the snow, we hear a lot about snow removal. I'm sure Phil has heard a lot about it. When you're walking right after a snowfall, you see it and you get bombarded with it. And a lot of people are out west are concerned because in their mind they pay a lot of taxes and they don't see the street. They come down the main roads, but they don't hit the side roads. And sometimes for a few days, I know I live on Dryden Drive. We generally will not see a plow until the following day, and it's a problem because if you have an ambulance, I don't think could get through if it was really necessary. So, and then one of the other things that people have really hit me on is they want to be able to. They want an alderman that's going to call them back. They want an alderman that's going to provide them information. And a lot of people have talked to me about that.
Is your sense that they aren't getting that right now, or haven't been for some time?
In the past, I don't think that they feel like they've had. A lot of it was not getting calls back. In my job, you have to call people back. I was very good friends with Gene Callahan, and I got the Callahan method. He always told me, you make sure you get your calls returned. That's the best thing you could do as a public servant, is return phone calls. And so I've tried to always follow that in state government, and personally as well. So my goal is to be as accessible as possible, and but I think those are the four main things. Every neighborhood has their individual issues, be it crime, additional police patrols in Westchester to help crime and help reduce the speed on Westchester Boulevard. Or Lincolnshire, they don't want to see Lincolnshire Boulevard go to Route 4. Those are just two to name a couple. So,
Phil, what are your thoughts on Ward 10? What are its top priorities?
Well, I think the issues that Ralph has addressed are definitely some of the top issues in the ward. I think the thing with the roads is that we're seeing some progress in that area, and with the overlays, and we're going to see some more overlays in Panther Creek. Actually, I think it's starting maybe this week. And so I think that's we are beginning to address the issues. But I said early on, it's sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a festering sore, because we're doing overlays around the city, but we're failing to address 100-year-old sewers and 100-year-old water mains, not necessarily in Ward 10, but around the city that need to be addressed before we do the overlays. And so one of my goals is to see us come up with a comprehensive infrastructure plan that's going to address not only the roads and sidewalks, but also it's going to address the sewers and the water mains. We've got to go underground first before we come up and make the roads better on the surface. In our area, one of the big concerns that I see is what's going to happen with Archer Elevator and what's going to happen with West Isles. You know, we've got a beautiful YMCA building out there on the west side of Springfield. And we've got a great bike trail that runs from Stewart Park to Centennial Park. And people have to literally take their lives in their hands to get to either one of them, because there are no bike lanes. It's a 2-lane road. There are no sidewalks. I know people that live a block away from the new Y that are driving their children to the Y because they aren't safe in traveling there by foot or by bicycle. So I think we need to do something about that. When it comes to public safety, Ralph's right. The people in Westchester are concerned about more police protection. They're concerned because they regularly see things happening across the road from them, including the other night where a fellow held his whole family hostage and then killed himself. And they wonder, how long is it going to take for that to cross the road, cross Chatham Road and come into our area? But the other thing I think that's really important for public safety is we're desperately in need of a new fire station out between Panther Creek and Piper Glen. Right now, our response time in that area is not what it should be. And if we ever had an emergency, whether it be a fire or a medical emergency, where Station 12 was tied up, the next nearest stations are either Toronto Road or Station 9, which is out on Chatham Road. That's way too far for emergency services, whether it be fire or medical, to have to come to service not only a great deal of property, but a lot of lives that are out there in that area. So I'm in favor of a new fire station on Route 4 between Panther Creek and Piper Glen. When it comes to snow removal, one of the biggest problems we have with snow removal is the fact that we've reduced our headcount in the Department of Public Works so drastically in the last 4 years. And as a result of that, in order to provide the services, we're having to go outside to private vendors. We're having to subcontract that work, and the subcontractors don't have the proper equipment. If you send a city of Springfield snowplow out into a subdivision, it's a truck with a blade and a method of spreading salt as they go. So they not only clear the street of the snow, but they put the salt on so that what's left actually melts away and they have dry roads again. Instead, we have subcontractors going out with end loaders, no salt, and they do a rather poor job of removing the snow with the end loader because the end loader is too big to do the job, really, and they don't have any salt to follow up with. So we end up having slick roads, and we still have ruts, and we still have problems. And that's why people are concerned. They're not just concerned that they don't get the service, they're concerned they don't get adequate service when they do get it.
How much of a tax increase are you in favor of? We talked about a new fire station.
Yeah, I think we have to be absolutely. Here's the thing. I'm not here to say that we need a tax increase, but what I am here to say is that we've got to look for ways that we can accomplish these programs. Some of it may be through federal grants. For instance, the sewers in town. A lot of the sewers are currently that carry both sewage and stormwater. And the EPA, US EPA, said we can't do that. But there are grants available to help alleviate that situation. So we have to take advantage of those. I think that when it comes to taxes, we've got to look at ways that we can spread that tax base out. And one of the ways we can do that is through economic development. And I think we've done a really poor job of attracting new businesses to Springfield. I grew up here, and I've watched factories leave, and then I've watched other businesses like AT&T pull out. Huge call center, just shut down. They leave Springfield. And I think our attitude has been, if they come to us, we'll talk to them about what a great place Springfield is. We've got to go beyond that. We've got to say, we've got to be the ones going out saying, here's why you ought to come to Springfield. You know, we would be a great place for you to relocate. And whether that be medical industry or whether it be others, I think we've got to go out and get those, because as we develop our economy and improve our economy, then we're going to have a larger tax base, which means we're going to be able to do some of the things we want to do. One of the things I think we've got to do is hire a city planner. I mean, our city has been haphazardly put together for a number of years now. And if we'd had a city planner who knew what they were doing, I think, and I'm talking about a real city planner. I'm not talking about hiring somebody local. I'm talking about finding somebody who really knows their business. I don't think if we'd had that in place, I don't think we'd have Centennial Park sitting where it is right now. Because I think we'd have to have roads in there first. And that's the way Bloomington does it. And I know Bloomington's got a much larger tax base than we do. But you know why? Because they've gone out and attracted business there. And they've made a difference.
I have so many follow-up questions here.
All right.
Okay, first real quickly, let's circle back to the fire station issue.
Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on needing another?
I agree that we need a fire station. Right now, currently, the people in Piper Glen tell me that when there's a medical issue, that we have Chatham roll in on them. And now they're the closest fire station, and we shouldn't have to rely on another community to take care of our medical or fire needs. One of the problems that you have is we've expanded the city. When we expand the city, we expand the roads, we expand the sewer, we expand the water, but we don't expand the fire protection. And it's a big part of it. And I agree with Phil. We have to look at ways to pay for this. And I think that I agree that economic development is a huge part of that. I'm not a believer in raising taxes. To me, you do everything you can before you raise taxes. And we need to make some priorities, and we may have to shift some money around in order to meet those priorities. But I just don't think that we need to have Chatham, doing our fire protection in the city of Springfield. I mean, it's great that they do, but if we're going to expand and continue to expand, we've got to move the fire. We need a firehouse out there.
Speaking of expansion, what are your thoughts on should the city continue to expand westward or in any direction, or should it be concentrating on what it has now with the resources that it has?
Is that from?
Let's start with you.
Okay. Don't know how we're doing it. Well, I think expansion is great, but we have to stay within our own means. And right now, I guess you have to look at what the tax base will be on the expansion, and if the city can afford it. I think it's great that the city has moved west, but there's problems along with that, not just fire protection, but keeping up with the roads. As we've expanded, as Phil's alluded to, we haven't expanded the street department. So we've got more streets to plow, more streets to take care of, more sewers to take care of, with less people. So you're really putting the screws to people to try to keep everything up to date. So, I mean, we have to look at it. We have to have a balance of it. I think what we really need to look at is we need some industry. We've got a lot of white collar work, a lot of white collar jobs here. What we don't have is a lot of blue collar jobs. We have some great blue collar. Noodle Products is a good example, and there's others, but we've got to get some industry here. I have a friend of mine that's in economic development. He had a guy come in and wanted to put. He had money in hand, and he couldn't get anybody to really assist him because it seemed like they didn't want to have any factory anywhere around Springfield. So, I mean, we've got to change that, because that's business that it's income tax that we get, and it's also tax revenue from the business. So
What do you know about that situation? I mean, I realize you may not want to get into too many specifics, but what do you know about what he came to Springfield?
yeah, I really can't. I don't want to get it.
Business though.
Yeah,
what were the?
he was from out of the country.
Okay.
He came in. I don't know. I really don't want to get into specifics because, but I do know.
Was it just attitude? But I mean, you must know something about what put him off or what kind of.
My understanding was, he came in on a weekend, and he just couldn't get people from the city to connect with him. That they gave him some things to look at. I think he went through some realtors, but he didn't really. You've got a guy ready to invest a large sum of money. I mean, I think you have to bend over backwards for him.
What do you think could have helped in that situation? What does the city not have set up that could have?
Well, I think that we need to have a good economic development program to entice these industries to come to Springfield. I mean, we're in a great location. We've got 72 and 55 right here. We've got one of the, there's the traffic count is insane going through there. So it's easy to get to where you need to go. But I'm sorry, I just can't. I don't want to get into specifics of it. But
I assume that it seems like something's lacking in terms of the system that's set up.
Right. And that's what I thought too. And my first thought was, well, there needs to be a single point that businesses can go to get the information they need.
Phil, what are your thoughts on expansion?
On our expansion, one of the things that I think the economy is going to take care of our expansion. Right now, Illinois is 50th in new home sales. And I don't see that turning around very quickly. With no new home sales, you're not going to find many people developing new subdivisions. And so what would have been new subdivisions in Springfield are not going to happen. So we begin to look at infill. And I think that's one of the reasons that the ICON group endorsed me yesterday, was because I care about the inner city and about doing infill work and about building habitat houses around throughout the neighborhoods so that we can grow, but we can grow without having to expand any further westward. I think that eventually the day will come where we'll move back to building new subdivisions and all that, but I don't see it in the near future. So I think those kind of things are probably going to take care of themselves. I don't think we're going to have to be too concerned about 10 people going out and building a new subdivision out on the west side of Springfield. Just not going to happen. You can't make any money.
And then what about this issue of economic? Well, you had talked a little bit about economic development. Do you have any thoughts on?
Yeah, there's one other thing. Yeah, there's one other thing in the area of economic development. We've got to change our attitude in city government about how we deal with people who want to build, who want to do new things, who want to enhance their businesses. It is absolutely terrible. I didn't mention I'm also a builder, and I build a lot of houses. I have built a lot of houses on the west end of town. I've also built, though, in Chatham and in Sherman, and I can go to Sherman or I can go to Chatham, and in one day I can have a building permit. I can go in, hand them my plans, show them what I'm going to do. They look it over. They sign off on it. I give them a check. I've got a building permit. In Springfield, it may take me 3 weeks to get a building permit. A friend of mine is Court and Karen Kahn. They're good friends of mine. They wanted to build the beer garden down here at Oben and Isaac's. It took them 2 months to get a building permit to put an awning on that building, the outdoor bar, because nobody wanted to cooperate with them. We have an attitude that says, let's see what we can do to stop new things from happening, instead of what can we do to make this happen? What can we do to help? And we need to change our attitude.
So where's that come from?
I think it comes from, it comes out of Public Works, out of the building department, but it comes from the mayor. I think it's got to come from the top down. The city council and the mayor has to say to the building department and to our people that are working in there, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. we're going to stream. You know, a lot of people talked about streamlining the process, including former Mayor Davlin, and when he wanted to have a one-stop shop, and I was all for that, but it didn't ever happen. But it's got to happen, because as long as we continue to put roadblocks up for people who want to do good things for the city, we're going to continue to see our growth stymied.
Are either of you publicly supporting either candidate for mayor?
No.
No. My problem with that is I went to school with both of them. I'm good friends with both of them, and boy, it's a struggle. You know.
Yeah, me too.
Additionally, I would like to say one thing too. I think that the city of Springfield has been so used to not having issues with unemployment because state government has, up until Governor Blagojevich came in, it was pretty stable. You know, and we do have the nice, you know, we have a lot of healthcare jobs here in the city. But as the state started shifting to Chicago, we started seeing a lot more unemployment, a lot more issues involved. And I think that the cities, truthfully, I think we're just behind on the whole economic development platform, where other cities like Bloomington couldn't count on, you know, what was used to be stable jobs. They had to work to get things. I think that we're just behind on that, and we're catching up. And I think we have to look at other cities and take a page from them. And we're in direct competition with those cities. I mean, you know, but I think that as the state has gone, the city's just kind of you know, rested on its laurels, so to speak. And now we're starting to see where we can't do that anymore.
Are there areas in your ward in particular that you'd support some kind of commercial or industrial development? I'm not sure what the zoning.
We have zoning that would allow for some industrial development out the Wabash corridor, and I would think it would be an ideal place for that kind of development to happen.
Well, and additionally, we have Veterans Parkway heading south, and as you go out, you know, the 72 and that area off Cockrell Lane and by Parkway Point, there's large office buildings and whatnot, and there are some I guess some warehouses off of behind like Mariah's and places like that currently.
And I think we have to be sure that we cooperate with these kind of businesses so that they will come here, and not, instead of building a warehouse or an industrial facility on West Wabash, they move it 3 miles further west, and now they're in Curran. And instead of our city getting the sales tax revenues, another city is going to get the sales tax revenues. Instead of our school district getting the sales tax revenues, New Berlin's going to be getting them. So I think we have to. I think we have to. We just have to be really aggressive about getting new companies to come to Springfield.
I'm intrigued by your comment about Centennial Park earlier. I'd like to circle back to that because it's a little bit of a peeve of mine that we have this park out there and people are encouraged to bring their families and have all sorts of sporting practices and things like that. Yet there's not enough parking. There are no restrooms out there for families to
I agree.
things like that. The park district had indicated last year that there's a problem with the city and the district agreeing on how to get some of that stuff done. I think the city needs money from the park district in order to put sewers out there, or run water lines is what it is.
Absolutely.
A, do you think that's a symptom of what you're talking about? And B, is that something that you'd be willing to work on with the park district to try to figure out how do we get?
Well, yes, I do think that's part of the problem, and I think that's one of the reasons why we don't see roads like Archer Elevator improved. Because while developers who did subdivisions had to put up their bonding to pay for their half of the road, special deals were cut with the park district, so they didn't have to put up any bonding. And so now the park district complains that they don't have the facilities, but it's as a result of the deals that they cut early on to not allow it to happen. But I think we have to, the city, we have to work with them. I think we got to stop expanding the number of parks we have. I think it's time to take better care of the parks that we do have. and improve the facilities that are there. I think we're a city that has a very good number of parks. I think we just need to make sure now that these parks are first-class parks.
From my perspective, I think that you know, once again, we get into a situation where the roads are built after after the neighborhoods are put in. And it concerns me because then they have these 15-year plans where they're going to have a road that goes from east to west or north to south, whatever it is, and it's originally supposed to go through a neighborhood. And then 15 years later, the road's not built, the neighborhood's got 500 homes there, and they're talking about expanding a road that greatly impacts that neighborhood. Now, people may not have known that road was supposed to go through. The one I'm speaking about primarily is Lincolnshire Boulevard. And, you know, I think that the problem that I have is we may be doing this backwards. The city, to me, the city should build the roads. Now, again, you get into the whole money aspect, but if you've got a northwest or north to south or east to west expansion planned, maybe it should be done before the neighborhoods put in completely. You know, Cobblestone, one of the things, I live in Cobblestone, and I live two blocks away from Archer Elevator Road. Now, Cobblestone was built in probably 25 years ago. And Arch Elevator was a problem then. And now we've got, I don't know, 1,000 houses in the area that, as Phil spoke, the new YMCA. And we've got a road that in the winter you can't tell where the ditch is. And so now what's going to happen is when they do expand, when they do widen it, which is desperately needed, they're going to impact probably, 1,000 people that use that road. Instead of building the road first, the way it should have been built, and then allowing the expansion, the neighborhood expansion. Now, I don't know what the best way to go about that is whether we, but it's something to look into. And it's not just that road; it happens all over. And then you get roads like Headley and West White Oaks Drive over by the Thornton gas station. You pull up there, it's literally 100 yards from a stoplight at you guys understand, you know where it's at. It's crazy to try to get out there. If you want to turn left, you better start praying because you're going to need to, or you're going to be there for hours.
Yeah, you could say a whole rosary.
Right, you could, but it's just things like that I think that are driving the people of Springfield crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy.
On my list to ask you about Headley right there.
It's
10 years ago that was an issue during the mayor's
right.
race.
I don't know about, I know they've talked about a roundabout at Isles and Archer Elevator, which could be interesting, but we've got to look at alternatives to that. We can't throw a stoplight up everywhere. But what can we do there to try to fix this? This is a case where a good city planner may have stopped that, said, "Whoa, we're not going to do this. We'll stop it at Thornton, or we'll stop it here, whatever." But that's a dangerous. That's probably one of the most dangerous intersections we have in Ward 10.
Yes.
And it's scary. It's scary. I'll avoid that for. And then when you avoid it, you go through a neighborhood. And they're not real thrilled about that. So, it's a...
So you're in favor of a city planner as well, it sounds like, yes?
I am in favor of a city planner. My concern is where do we get the money to pay for it?
Would you be willing to sacrifice the inspector general if you could
to me,
money toward a planner?
To me right now, I think I understand the need for an inspector general. My concern about the inspector general, and of course it's all still in it needs to be looked at. But my concern is the cost of the inspector general. What generally happens is, okay, they spent $200,000 for this one. I think it was $250, something like that. Well, generally those offices don't ever stay at one person. Then you get the support person. Then you have to hire assistant inspector generals. Then you have to, then you end up with a staff, and next thing you know, it's a $500,000 $1 million a year that you're investing in that. The planner's the same way. You're not just going to have one city planner. You're going to have staff and everything else that's involved in it. I just am concerned about where to get the money.
What if you could have one or the other?
Right now, I would say the city is in desperate need of a city planner because it'll help impact. In my mind, it helped impact economic development. Fire protection, roads, everything.
Phil, what do you think? If you could have one or the other, which one would you?
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't think that I would choose between the two because they're totally different kinds of positions. The inspector, there's probably nothing more important to the citizens of Springfield than accountable city government, and that a government that's open and transparent. And I think that the inspector general is the kind of position that will encourage that to happen. Right now, an employee is afraid for their job to be a whistleblower. And if they had someone safe, someplace safe, where they could go and say, this is what's going on, and then somebody would investigate it, I think we might save a number of the lawsuits that we've had against the city of Springfield in the past 10 years that have cost us a great deal more than what the Inspector General's office is going to cost us. Because I think we can maybe nip some of these things in the bud and get ahead of them.
Can that not be done by setting a tone, like you mentioned earlier, from the top down, and setting up a structure where people can do that without spending that much money on an Inspector General?
I think that the tone is important, but I don't think that when you're one of the people down on the lower rungs, I don't think the tone's going to encourage you enough to put your job on the line to go out there and blow the whistle on somebody who's doing something that's absolutely wrong.
Do you have first-hand information that actually occurs?
Do I have first-hand information? My
Are you afraid to report, or are you just describing what you think?
No, I think it's a general sense. I don't know of anyone who hasn't, but on the other hand, I don't know of anyone who has. So you would think with all these things that have gone on in the past, and we just came through the big issue with Shredgate, and that was discovered through somebody's FOIA request. It was not discovered by an employee saying what's happening here is wrong. And so I think we need to create an environment where people can say it's wrong, but I think part of creating that environment is to have an inspector general.
It actually happened because of the FOIA request.
That's right.
It wasn't discovered as a result.
Well, it happened because of the FOIA request, but that's how it became public too, though. If that FOIA request would have never happened, we'd have never known. Nothing, it wouldn't have happened. It probably would have got shredded anyway, right?
No, I'm
But,
saying it wouldn't have gotten shredded. It would have shredded because
well,
sensitive.
they sped up the shredding process as a result of the FOIA request. But I think the FOIA thing is another whole area where I think there are some things right now that you have to file FOIA requests for that you shouldn't have to. I'm a realtor, okay? And so I've got a client who's interested in a house that's in foreclosure. And his question to me is, how many fines does the city have levied against this house that I'm going to have to pay? Because they aren't recorded fines; they're just held in the clerk's office. And I said, I have no idea. So my assistant calls the clerk's office and said, what do I need to do to find this out? We have to file a FOIA request to find out what fines have been levied against this house. It should be public information. There are some cities where most everything that the city does is available online. You can go and do it. You can find it. Not personnel records, but other things like that. Fines, code violations, things like that. You ought to be able to get them without having to file a FOIA request. And I've already talked to the clerk's office about it. And I think I've got some agreement there that we need to change the way we do that. We need to work on making things better.
So doubling back on the Inspector General,
Yes.
if you want that and you want a city planner too, do you have any ideas of what could be dropped in the city to find the money for them?
I
to do both.
I think the city planners probably could be paid for out of the money that we save doing projects when they ought to be done instead of doing them, 10 years after the fact. When they're going to cost a lot more money than what they would have if we'd have done them in the beginning. I also think it'll keep us from making some bad mistakes. I'm still not sure how we're going to resolve the Headley and West White Oak situation. I'm not sure that there is a solution to it. But until, if we'd had a city planner, I don't think we'd have that. And, we're going to spend probably upwards of $1 million or more trying to fix that problem. And we could have hired a city planner and maybe avoided it in the beginning.
So you think a city planner could support itself by?
I think it might be able to. Yes.
Well, one thing on the inspector general, my only concern on this is we've gone a long time. This is the first time we've approached the inspector general, and I think the citizens do a good job of letting the city know when there's issues. The guy that cut down the tree on city time is a good example. In good economic times, I'm not going to argue that we need, we can use an inspector general. I'm sure there's a lot of things that we need with the city that we're short on. But I think that, from a priority standpoint, I think that, in my opinion, the city planner has got to be a higher priority. And generally, with the inspector general's offices, and I watched it as they developed it with the state of Illinois. It started out as a small office and ended up growing, and but I think that the city does a good job, and ultimately. They hear about things, and I agree with Phil that I think there's some people that are afraid to speak up, but I think if you do go from the top down and you tell the employees that it's okay and they're not going to get in trouble by being whistleblowers, I think that will help as well.
Okay, we talked about the firehouses. We both know where you stand on that. Hunter Lake, second water source. What are your thoughts? Need it? Should we drop it?
You want to go
Well,
first?
sure. I'll be happy to go first on that one. I think that there's no doubt that we need a secondary water source. I'm not sure that Hunter Lake is the best solution, but I think we need to continue to proceed with it and find out if we're even going to be able to do it. And if we aren't going to be able to do it, then I think we need to sell the land. I think we need to divest ourselves of the holdings.
I think that Hunter Lake is the only way to go for our water needs. Currently, the other solutions you have let's just look at the other solutions they had. The wells over at the Sangamon River. Studies have shown that it does not have the water to support our needs. Secondly, and nobody knows what will happen, but we get into a drought situation and we go over and we start pumping the water. Now there's other towns that have used that water for a lot longer than what we have. We start pumping the water. What's to stop them from filing an injunction saying you're taking our water? That's something that needs to be looked at. The second option they talk about is the wells over over by Havana. Well, just to get the right of way to pump water back to Springfield is going to be much more money than what it costs to build a Lake 2. We've got the land. We do. I think that we need to move on it. Now, the people have said that there hasn't been lakes built in the United States, and it's just not true. They build lakes in Texas the last 5 years. They've built quite a number of lakes. It's just that we got to be committed to it. But I do believe that we need to move on it. and again, as we get to the old adage, how do you pay for it? You know, right now, city of Springfield water rates are one of the lowest in the state. Chatham's is over 2.5 times larger than ours right now. Now, I'm not in favor of increasing water rates, but we have to look at you know, if we want to get industry, one of the things we have to have is we have to have a water source, a guaranteed water source, and we can't guarantee if the lake goes down. We have a situation like Decatur Lake, last year, 2 years ago, that we could support, you know, heavy industry. So we need a second water source. So I'm in favor of Hunter Lake.
You wanna-
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about it, when Lake Springfield was built, they called it Spalding's Folly, because it was, he said, we got to have an adequate source of water for this town if it's going to grow, and it's not enough to pump water from the Sangamon River. And he was ridiculed, and he pursued it and made it happen. And I just say today, I mean, where would we be without Lake Springfield? And I think the second lake, Hunter Lake, and I think we've got to look at all the options for Hunter Lake. I think, you know, they talked about not having any residences around that one. Maybe that's not right. Maybe we ought to. Maybe that's the way we're going to pay for it, is to have residences around the lake. Maybe that's it could be the next ideal place to live in Springfield, on Hunter Lake. We need to use the recreational opportunities that it would provide. And yeah, I would put a road in. I'd get there with the roads, especially some of the worst. This is ironic, but some of the worst roads in Springfield are the roads that are around the lake. And you don't hear a whole lot about that, but they're terrible, and they don't have sidewalks, and they don't have adequate drainage, and anyway,
Right.
and they have septic tanks, which we can't have that either. We don't want that.
And oddly enough, when Lake Springfield was built, a lot of people had lots. My grandparents had a lot out on Lake Springfield. I'm not sure what street they were on, but they ended up selling it because the roads were so bad they couldn't get into town to go to work.
Right.
So they ended up selling the lot at the time. And yeah, if we build Lake 2, we do have to build the roads to get to the. We need to plan it well, though.
Absolutely.
You brought up water rates. You think the water rates are pretty low, fair?
My understanding on doing research about Hunter Lake is that our water rates are one of the lowest in the state. Now, that's our water rates. That's not our electric rates. Our electric rates. My concern is, I think that they're high. My concern with the electric bill is you have this little line item that nobody knows about, or nobody really pays attention. It's the fuel adjustment cost, and that fluctuates from month to month. And it depends, you know. And if you talk to people about the wind energy, is a good example that we got roped into. That they say, well, it doesn't affect our bottom line at CWLP. Well, no, because they put that charge for that month in that fuel adjustment charge. And so it doesn't affect their bottom line because it gets passed on to the ratepayers. And CWLP needs to start, we need to change some things to where they start realizing about whatever they do affects the rates. And it affects the rates to the people. What I like to see us do is we need to have some way to let the customers know what it is they're getting charged out of that line item. What went up? Coal prices went up this week, or we're getting hit with this, or we had something this month go up, or this quarter. But that's an issue on the bill that's what raises your bill every month.
And what are your thoughts on electric rates?
Well, right now we do have the lowest utility rates of any city our size in Illinois, and I think that we need to try to keep them as low as possible. But I do think we've got to protect the utility. I think at all costs, because if that utility was ever privatized, which I'm totally opposed to, but if it was ever privatized, our rates would skyrocket, and we wouldn't believe how high they're going to be. And so, and it wouldn't take a vote of the city council. They'd go before the Commerce Commission and to get their rate because they're justifying it by what their expenses are. So we got to look at that. The other thing is we can't continue to balance the budget of the city on the back of the utility. And so I think we've got to look at that pilot program really hard. I think I'm not suggesting we should do away with the pilot program, but I think we've got to take a real hard look at it and say, is this really what a private corporation would have paid in taxes to the city? And or are we just adjusting the pilot program on basis of how much the city needs to balance the budget?
My concern with CWLP is that, and I want to protect the utility as well. Springfield, Missouri has a board of directors over their utility there, and they're about the same size as we are. One of the things that board does is it deals with the day-to-day operations where they are people, they're not political, they're people that know the utility business. Now, I've met Eric Hobby, spent some time, learned more in a half hour spent with Eric Hobby, and he's very good. But my concern is, as a city councilman, our city councilmen do not know how electric generation operates and things like that. It would be like a cardiologist coming in and telling us, about what he needs to build a heart. I think that we need to look at some sort of a independent board that does the day-to-day expenditures, and then refers back to us. We need to protect the utility. I'm against shutting down the process because I think what will happen, the 31 and 32 generators, because I think what will happen is eventually, as the power builds, we got to be put in a situation where we can sell power on the grid, and that's when we'll make money. But right now, power is too low for us to do that. And ultimately, it'll probably go. The speculation is it's going to go up. So I think that, and I think that's what Eric's wanting to do. But I think that it's just a matter of how many years we got to wait for.
In that vein, what do you think about the committee of the whole structure as it exists now? And I've not seen you have you been at council meetings?
I've been watching on TV,
Okay,
is what I do.
That's probably even better. You're able to eat dinner and do other things that normal people do.
Some of them, it's good entertainment sometimes.
It's reality TV.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
What do you think about the committee of the whole?
Right now, I think it's good because all the aldermen are involved. I think that for something like the utility, though, there may need to be a special committee for that. And I don't know, again, that it's you got to have people that know that particular what about power and generation and things like that that can assist on keeping it running and then reporting back to the city council.
So in your mind, that's the only area that would require any special.
Right now, yeah. I think right now, yes. Yeah.
Well, I think there are pros and cons to the Committee of the Whole. The one thing I like about the Committee of the Whole is that it gives the opportunity for every alderman to be involved in all of the different issues instead of putting them in one committee and then it comes out onto the floor vote, and that's the first time that some of the aldermen have ever heard of the issue, and so they have to sort of be re-educated. And so this way they get educated at the Committee on the Whole. They're able to vote then when they're actually in the council session. So I'd be in favor of keeping the Committee of the Whole at this point. I don't think the other system was as good. I do not think we should have a separate governing board over CWLP. I think we have that in the city council. And unlike my opponent, I think that I think that the aldermen know more about the utility than what we think. And having been at most of the council meetings since I chose to run, Eric gives great reports about what's going on with the utility. And if you listen closely, you understand why we can't shut down 31 and 32. You understand why it makes more sense economically to keep those two open, to change the way that they're fired, and then because otherwise we'd have to create a way of stepping down the power so that it'll be on the grid for the old part of the town, and that'd be more expensive than keeping them open. So, I mean, I think the council can do that. I think we hire the expert to run the utility, and then we rely on the information that we get, and I believe the council can make the decisions.
What's your position on residency requirements?
I'm opposed to residency.
I'm opposed as well. To me, Joan, the good example, Frazee Road is 2 miles out of Springfield. It's if you want to raise horses or something, you like horses. There's not a lot of 5-acre parcels in the city of Springfield, and if they are, you can't afford them. You've got a lot of small, 5-acre neighborhoods just right outside the city. And I don't think we should prevent people. That you could have a great engineer that lives out there, and I don't think we should prevent the city from hiring. It really kind of limits our hiring. Now, along that same vein, I don't think that we should have firemen living in St. Louis or Bloomington or whatever. I think that there should be a certain parameter of you have to, certain people that drive the plow trucks or whatever, you have to be here within 30 minutes of being called. And you can't do that in St. Louis or Bloomington or whatever.
You realize, though, that the fire schedules permit a great deal of time off.
I understand that, but my concern is if we had a large fire, they would call people in. They would need to call people in, or if there was an emergency of some sort, that they have to get a hold of someone, and living in St. Louis is kind of a distance to get in. So.
Did you want to elaborate at all? Residency?
No, I just, I'm just one of those kind of guys that says, as long as the person's doing their job, showing up on time, if they're needed, if they're on call and they can get here in the amount of time that their employer says that they have to get here, then I don't think we should be telling them where they ought to live. I don't want somebody to tell me where I have to live, but I guess they have, because I have to live in Ward 10 if I'm going to run for Ward 10 alderman. So
One quick Ward 10 issue that's out there right now, the apartment complex proposal. Do either of you have opinions on that?
Well,
If it keeps getting delayed, it may hit your council.
go ahead.
Well, I live in Cobblestone, and I understand the concerns that Cobblestone Homeowners Association has. And as it stands now, I'm against the apartments. I don't think that we're going to be successful in preventing them. So I'm hoping that they get together with Mr. Joyner and try to work out a solution. That's what I've suggested, because the first phase, I think, has already been approved. But my concern is that I think that we need to figure out a better way. There was a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that somehow everybody missed all the notifications for. Now, out of 600 people or whatever that are in Cobblestone, they all missed it. Okay, well, maybe that happened, but there ought to be a way people can sign up to get emails, or I mean, in today's world, that let them sign up, get emails on when the Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting, even the City Council, and what's on the agenda at that time. I mean, I think that would save some, a lot of grief on that. But I'm with Cobblestone on the apartments. I'm being a resident, it does affect me.
And why is there opposition to an apartment building when that seems to be a choice for people that can't afford it?
Right. Oh, well,
Or money.
right. I think one of the problems, there's a couple issues. Number one, the consolidated number of people in a small area, and they will be dumping out on, in a sense, they'll be coming out on Archer Elevator, which is already heavily traveled and needs upgrades and whatnot.
How big would the complex be? How many dwellings?
Joan, I'm not sure what the final. I've heard I've heard 170. I've heard a lot of different numbers. I don't know for sure. Yeah.
Do you have an opinion on it?
Oh, absolutely. I have opinion on everything. Just ask me. No, the thing with the apartments, and I've told the Cobblestone people this, and I've told the developer this. I believe that because it's coming in right next door to these folks, that they should have a say in it. And as their representative on the city council, I'm going to vote against the apartments. But when I look at it, at a property was originally zoned I-1, which meant that some much heavier use could have gone in there without ever going through planning and zoning. They went and had the property downzoned for the apartments. And the whole idea of zoning is that you move from the intense use of the property to a less intense use, to a less intense use, to finally single-family residences. And that's exactly what this is. And that's why I think they lost the court case and why Mr. Joyner is being allowed to build the first 3 units. The issue then gets back to you have to stop those things long before this process. And if you've got an I-2 zoning right next to your subdivision, you better start taking a look at it and saying to a city planner or to a planning and zoning commission, why do we have this kind of zoning backing up right next to duplexes? But when you look at it from a practical standpoint and from a zoning standpoint, you go from the single family to the duplex to the multifamily to the business to the industrial. And I'm going to vote against it because my constituents are against it.
But do either of you is there a need to reassess the zoning plan in Springfield in any way? As the city has grown, and I might use a term, perhaps it changes all the time, I'm not sure, but is that something you've given any thought to or researched?
I haven't looked at it as a whole. I think you're right. It does change all the time, but it usually changes by the request of somebody wanting to do something different with the property. And I'm not sure that's not a good thing. But I just, I think, it's like people moving in across from an airport and then complaining that the airport makes a lot of noise. You can't do that. I mean, you have to say, oh, okay, I chose to move across from an airport.
I kind of think that, we need to do a better job of letting people know what zoning is where. It seems like people, they'll move into an area, they don't realize that this is going to, the first time that this all started was with Walmart. Now, we could have had a Walmart right next to our subdivision. And, and they fought, the homeowners association fought it, and they were successful on getting it moved. And but the thought of a Walmart, right? I mean, literally, the back of Walmart was going to back up to duplex or to condos, To me, I think that as we plan, we get into the planning phase. But yeah, I think it wouldn't hurt to have to relook at the zoning in different areas.
Well, we've kept you over the amount of time that we told you we would be here, so thank you both for joining us today and sharing your thoughts with us.
We have a chance
Thank
for
you.
final comments.
Sure, if you'd like to, that'd be great.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to mention that during this run, I've been able to acquire a number of endorsements. And most recently, ICON yesterday endorsed me, but AFSCME has endorsed me. International Association of Firefighters they voted to support me, so did the firefighters. The laborers have endorsed. The Southern Central Illinois Laborers Political League has. The Realtor Political Action Committee. Then I have a number of officials from Steve Dove and Corey Jobe to Wes Barr, who's current sheriff, to Wayne Rosenthal, who just took over as DNR director, to Raymond Poe, who's a state representative. And most recently, and this actually isn't going to be announced till Monday, but I'll give you the scoop, Jim Edgar has endorsed me as well.
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here. What this race is about is commitment, and I've been on boards and commissions. I've had 100% attendance. Some people don't believe that attendance is mandatory when they get elected. I do. I work hard to support the people that I've been asked to support, and I will continue to do so. And with that, I just want to thank you guys again for allowing me to be here.